Owning a home is a big part of the American dream. It symbolizes stability and provides peace of mind. However, in the past decade, particularly after the COVID-19 pandemic, the prospect of home ownership has become increasingly difficult for 99% of average American people. So, let's find out why owning a home has become so unaffordable for the average American. There are 4 parameters responsible for the current housing situation. They are the average income, the mortgage industry, developers, and supply and demand. Before we move further, if you enjoy the content of this channel, then it would be awesome if you subscribed and liked this video. Average income. A fundamental element of homeownership is the mortgage. Without a mortgage, owning a home for the middle class is impossible. Middle-class individuals usually rely on a 20% down payment and secure the remaining 80% through a mortgage. This practice is very common in the real estate market. In the 1970s, the average family income hovered around $20,000, and homes were priced at approximately $70,000 to $80,000. With prudent savings, a family could accumulate enough funds for a down payment in just 1 or 2 years, making home ownership accessible. Fast forward to 2024, where the average family income has increased to $50,000 to $75,000, but the average home price has skyrocketed to $400,000. The resulting disparity, with home prices nearly 6 times the average income. In the current situation, prospective buyers are finding it very challenging, and they are struggling to afford even the initial down payment of the house. The higher home prices make it difficult for prospective buyers to accumulate the required 20% down payment. The mortgage industry. As mentioned earlier, the fundamental part of owning a home is a mortgage. The interest rates on these mortgages play a significant role in home ownership. One of the main reasons for the rise in home prices in the last 10 to 15 years is that interest rates have been very low. Low interest rates mean you can borrow more, and therefore people can bid more for the houses they want. For example, in the 1980s, when interest rates were over 10% and house prices were much lower. If interest rates were 12%, then paying $2,000 a month over 30 years would let you borrow $100,000. You could easily afford a house for about $100,000 during those times. On the other hand, if the interest rate is as low as 3%, a $2,000 monthly payment would enable you to borrow $400,000 over a period of 30 years. As you can see in this chart from the 1980s, when rates were at a staggering 18%, homes were still affordable in those times. Now, in 2024, where rates stand at 7%, it becomes evident that even with lower interest rates, homes remain unaffordable for many. The 7% interest rate is still much higher, as the same mortgages were available before COVID at around 3 to 4%. But since the last 10 to 15 years, the prices of houses have risen to more than $400,000. This chart depicts interest rate trends since 2022 and reveals a steady rise, crossing the 5% mark in 2024. Homeowners who purchased properties between 2010 and 2020 benefited from historically low interest rates below 4%. These homeowners are hesitant to sell. Even if the homeowners want to sell, they are fearful of incurring higher mortgage rates on a new home purchase. This dissuades them from entering the market. It's just common sense. Why would any homeowner sell his existing home and then take a mortgage for a new home at a higher price? Renting a home is also equally expensive, so instead, the homeowners prefer to renew their existing houses, and even if they want to sell, they are waiting for interest rates to go down. So higher mortgage rates are not only dampening consumer demand, but they are also limiting inventory. This leads to our next point: developers, supply, and demand. A higher interest rate has caused a shortage of willing sellers. But what about the new houses built? Has America not built any new houses in the last 10 to 15 years? With limited availability, more buyers are turning to new houses instead of existing ones. The reality is that the supply of homes for sale in the US is near a record low, and the gap between supply and demand is widening. Single-family home construction has suffered from a severe labor shortage that began well before the pandemic, but was then exacerbated by it. While construction of new houses is actually slower than it was before the pandemic, developers would have to double their new home construction pace to keep up with the demand. Right now, builders are only finishing about 1.5 million housing units a year. The National Association of Realtors says it leaves a shortage of about 5.5 million homes. The pandemic caused disruptions in the supply chain for building materials. These disruptions have led to shortages and price increases, making construction more expensive and time-consuming. Labor shortages. The construction industry is experiencing a significant labor shortage. There is a huge demand for more skilled workers, such as carpenters, welders, and plumbers. So, increasing the speed of new construction is also difficult. Land availability and zoning. In many desirable locations, there's limited availability of land suitable for new housing development. Additionally, zoning regulations in some areas restrict the types and densities of housing that can be built, further limiting supply. Financing and market volatility. Higher interest rates and economic uncertainties are making it more difficult for developers to secure financing for new projects. Additionally, volatile housing markets discourage developers from taking on the risk of building new homes when demand is uncertain. The number of available homes on the market in June was down more than 47% from the typical amount before the COVID-19 pandemic began in early 2020. These are some reasons why homes are becoming unaffordable for middle-class Americans.